Everyone thought I'd crumble after being humiliated right to my face. But they forgot one thing about me. I don't know how to quit. That night, standing before hundreds of eyes at my product launch, watching the spotlight catch every detail of my presentation, I knew this was it. This was the moment I'd been building toward for 3 grueling years. The same people who'd laughed at my worthless garbage were about to witness my ultimate revenge. And the best part? He was sitting right there in the front row, completely unaware of what was coming. My name is Emily Carver. And 3 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my career, or so everyone told me. At 34, I'd walked away from a 6-figure salary at VantageWorks, one of Hartford's most prestigious tech companies, to chase what my colleagues called a pipe dream. 8 years of climbing the corporate ladder, countless nights perfecting product designs, and a corner office with a view of the Connecticut River. I'd thrown it all away for an idea that kept me awake at night. The Boston Innovators Summit was supposed to be my breakthrough moment. I'd spent weeks preparing, rehearsing my pitch until every word felt natural. The Marriott Copley Place buzzed with the energy of hundreds of entrepreneurs, investors, and industry titans. I remember adjusting my blazer for the 10th time, clutching my prototype like a lifeline as I navigated through clusters of people discussing valuations and market disruptions. That's when I saw him. Gregory Miles. Even in a room full of successful people, he commanded attention. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than my entire startup budget, surrounded by a circle of admirers hanging on his every word. Miles had built 3 unicorn companies and now played kingmaker in the tech world. One nod from him could secure millions in funding. One dismissive comment could destroy careers. "Emily, come here. You have to meet Gregory," called out Jason Hartley, an old colleague who'd made the introduction I'd been desperately seeking. My heart hammered as I approached the group. This was it. My chance to get in front of someone who could change everything. "Gregory, this is Emily Carver. She's developed something interesting in the productivity space," Jason said, stepping aside. Miles barely glanced at me, his attention still half-focused on his phone. "Another productivity app? The market's saturated." "Actually, it's not just an app," I began, pulling out my prototype. "It's a complete ecosystem that integrates physical and digital task management in a way that—" "Let me see that." He snatched the device from my hands with the casual authority of someone used to taking whatever he wanted. The circle of people around us grew quiet, watching. He turned it over, pressed a few buttons, his expression shifting from disinterest to disdain. Then he laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a harsh, mocking sound that cut through the cocktail chatter around us. "This?" He held up my prototype like it was contaminated. "This is what you left VantageWorks for?" Jesus Christ. Emily, this is garbage, complete garbage, not worth the plastic it's molded from. The words hit me like physical blows. People were staring now, some with pity, others with secondhand embarrassment. One woman actually covered her mouth in shock. "The interface is amateur, the concept is derivative, and the execution—" He tossed the prototype back at me so carelessly I almost dropped it. "Is embarrassingly poor. You want my advice? Go back to VantageWorks and beg for your job back. At least there you were adding some value, even if it was just following someone else's vision." He turned to his audience, shaking his head with theatrical disappointment. This is what happens when people confuse having a job in tech with actually understanding innovation. Waste of everyone's time. The circle of people laughed, nervous, uncomfortable laughter, but laughter nonetheless. My face burned. My hands shook as I clutched my prototype. I wanted to defend myself, to explain the months of research, the problem I was solving, the early user feedback that had been so promising, but my throat had closed up completely. "Nothing to say?" Gregory smirked. "That's probably for the best. Save yourself further embarrassment." I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, surrounded by people who wouldn't meet my eyes. Jason had disappeared. The woman who'd gasped was now whispering to her companion. Someone actually took a photo, probably for their Instagram story about witnessing a startup founder's public humiliation. Somehow, I managed to turn and walk away, my legs moving automatically while my mind screamed. I made it to the bathroom before the tears came, hot and angry, smearing the makeup I'd carefully applied that morning when I still believed this would be my big break. Looking at my reflection, red eyes, ruined mascara, still clutching that worthless prototype, I felt something shift inside me. The humiliation was there, yes, burning like acid in my chest. But underneath it, something else began to grow, something harder, sharper. Gregory Miles had just made a very public bet that I would fail. He'd staked his reputation on my inadequacy, turned my dreams into a punchline for his sycophantic audience. He had no idea what he'd just started. That night, I drove back to Hartford in silence, Gregory's words playing on repeat in my mind like a broken record. Garbage. Complete garbage. Not worth the plastic it's molded from. Each replay felt like another slap, another twist of the knife. By the time I reached my apartment, my humiliation had crystallized into something else entirely. Pure, concentrated rage. I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and started typing. Not code, not product specs, but words. Raw, honest, furious words. Journal entry, March 15th, 11:47 p.m. Gregory Miles thinks he broke me tonight. He thinks I'll crawl back to VantageWorks tomorrow. Beg for my old job. Prove him right about everything. He has no idea who he's dealing with. I didn't claw my way out of East Hartford, didn't put myself through UConn on scholarships and 3 jobs. Didn't survive the Boys Club of Tech for 8 years just to let some silver spoon asshole determine my worth. He wants to see garbage? Fine. I'll show him what this garbage can become. The wine turned into coffee. One journal entry became 10 pages of plans, strategies, and promises to myself. By sunrise, I had written what I would later call my manifesto, a declaration of war that only I would ever read. The next morning, I called Samantha Chen. We'd worked together at VantageWorks before she'd left to freelance as a software engineer. Sam was brilliant, underestimated, and most importantly, she understood what it felt like to be dismissed by men like Gregory Miles. Emily, it's 7 in the morning. This better be. I need you, I said, cutting straight to the point. I'm building something, and I need the best engineer I know. Can you pay me? Not yet, maybe not for months. There was a long pause. What happened in Boston? I told her everything, every humiliating detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment before saying, Fuck Gregory Miles. When do we start? Within a week. Sam had brought in Lena Rodriguez, a marketing genius who'd been laid off from a major firm for being too aggressive in her strategies, code for not playing nice with incompetent male supervisors. The 3 of us met in my living room, surrounded by whiteboards, laptops, and an unhealthy amount of energy drinks. So, what's the plan? Lena asked, feet propped up on my coffee table. We build a better product and hope Miles notices? No, I said, pulling up the business plan I'd been refining obsessively. We build something so undeniably successful that when it launches, when everyone's talking about it, when investors are fighting to get in, he'll have to watch it happen. And everyone will remember what he said about it. Sam grinned. Revenge served at scale. I like it. We incorporated as Artemis Tech that month, pooling our meager savings to cover legal fees. My severance package from VantageWorks became our seed money. I moved out of my decent apartment into a studio above a pizza place in East Hartford. The smell of pepperoni became so ingrained in my clothes that I stopped noticing it. My parents called weekly, worried. Emily, honey, you had such a good job. Why are you doing this to yourself? Friends stopped inviting me out because I always declined. Dating became a distant memory. My world narrowed to 3 things: the product, the team, and the promise I'd made to myself in that journal. Some nights, when the code wouldn't compile or another investor passed on us, I'd pull up Gregory Miles's Twitter feed. He was always there, pontificating about innovation, sharing photos from yacht parties and tech conferences, playing the role of industry oracle. In one tweet, posted just 2 weeks after Boston, he wrote, "Too many wannabe founders think passion substitutes for talent. The market always corrects these delusions." 67 likes, 14 retweets, 3 comments agreeing with his wisdom. I screenshotted it, printed it out, and pinned it above my desk. Sam thought I was crazy. Lena understood immediately. "You're going to make him eat those words," she said, staring at the printout. "No," I corrected her. "I'm going to make him choke on them." The apartment above the pizza place became our unofficial headquarters. We called it the oven, partly for the constant smell of baking dough, partly because we were cooking up something of our own. Sam would code until her eyes burned. Lena crafted guerrilla marketing strategies on a shoestring budget, and I refined, iterated, and obsessed over every detail of the product Gregory Miles had so publicly dismissed. Every small victory, our first working prototype, our first beta tester, our first piece of positive feedback, felt like a tiny act of rebellion. Every setback only made me hungrier. 3 months in, living on ramen and determination, I made a promise to myself and wrote it in large letters on our whiteboard. The next time Gregory Miles hears my name, he won't laugh. Underneath it, Sam added, "He'll wish he never heard it at all." We were young, angry, and naive enough to believe we could change our industry. But most importantly, we were motivated by something more powerful than money or fame. We were motivated by spite, and spite, I was learning, could move mountains. The garage we rented in East Hartford for $400 a month wasn't just small. It was a testament to how far I'd fallen from my corner office. Water stains mapped the ceiling like coffee rings. The concrete floor stayed cold even in summer. And the single window was painted shut. But it was ours. And that made it beautiful. "Declined again," Lena announced, tossing another rejection letter onto what we'd dubbed the Wall of No, a growing collection of passes from investors, accelerators, and grant programs. Techstars says we're not aligned with their current portfolio strategy. Translation: no one wants to invest in 3 women with no backing. Sam muttered, not looking up from her triple monitor setup we'd bought secondhand from a startup that went under. I stapled the rejection to the wall with the others. 43 rejections in 4 months. Each one stung less than the last. But they all reminded me of Gregory's words. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was garbage. "Stop it," Lena said, reading my face. "I know that look. We're not quitting." The truth was, we couldn't afford to quit. I'd maxed out 2 credit cards. Sam was 3 months behind on her student loans. Lena had moved back in with her parents, commuting an hour each way to our garage. We were running on fumes and stubbornness. Our first break came from desperation rather than strategy. Unable to afford proper user testing, I started approaching strangers at coffee shops, offering them free coffee in exchange for trying our prototype. Most people said no. The ones who said yes usually gave polite, unhelpful feedback. Then I met Marcus at a Starbucks in West Hartford. "You're solving the wrong problem," he said bluntly after 5 minutes with the prototype. Marcus ran a small consulting firm and had the exhausted look of someone drowning in administrative tasks. "The issue isn't tracking tasks, it's the context switching between physical and digital workflows. Your thing here," he pointed at our interface, "it's trying to be both but succeeding at neither." I wanted to argue, to defend months of work. Instead, I asked, "What would make it succeed?" That conversation led to 3 weeks of complete restructuring. We pivoted hard, focusing on seamless integration rather than replacement. Sam rebuilt the entire backend. I redesigned the interface from scratch. Lena crafted new messaging around workflow harmony rather than productivity revolution. The power got shut off twice during those weeks. We worked by laptop light, taking turns charging devices at the public library. The pizza place downstairs let us use their Wi-Fi in exchange for testing their online ordering system. Rock Bottom had sub-basements we hadn't imagined. "Emily, maybe we should consider..." Sam started one particularly dark night. "Consider what?" Getting real jobs? Proving Gregory right? I was going to say consider applying to Y Combinator again. They already rejected us twice. Third time's the charm. It wasn't. But Marcus became our first paying customer. Then introduced us to 3 others. 4 customers generating $400 in monthly recurring revenue, not enough to live on. But proof that someone, somewhere, found value in what Gregory had called worthless. The phone call that changed everything came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'd fallen asleep at my desk, drooling on keyboard when my phone buzzed. Is this Emily from Artemis Tech? The voice was professional despite the hour. Yes? I'm Jennifer Liu from TechCrunch. We received an interesting tip about your product from a user who claims it saved his company $30,000 in productivity losses. Can we talk? My heart stopped. Now? Tomorrow morning, I'm working on a piece about overlooked startups in the productivity space. The article ran 3 days later. The garage startup solving Silicon Valley's oldest problem. Jennifer had done her homework, interviewing our handful of customers who raved about our solution. She called us scrappy, innovative, and potentially game-changing. Within hours, my inbox exploded. Potential customers, curious investors, and even a few acquisition inquiries from larger companies. We went from 4 customers to 40 in 2 weeks. Our revenue jumped to $4,000 monthly. Sam, Lena, and I celebrated with champagne that cost $8 from CVS, drinking it from coffee mugs in our freezing garage. You know what this means, Lena said, slightly drunk and gesturing wildly. We're not garbage anymore, we're recyclable. We laughed until we cried, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The TechCrunch piece had given us visibility, but visibility meant Gregory would eventually hear about us. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it made me work harder. I pinned the article next to his tweet on our wall of no, now slowly becoming a wall of maybe. Underneath, I wrote a new promise. From garbage to gold. The garage didn't feel so cold anymore. The rejections didn't sting as much. We were still broke, still exhausted, still fighting for every customer. But we were no longer just 3 angry women with a grudge. We were a company, a real company. And we were just getting started. 6 months after the TechCrunch article, everything changed with a single email from a Fortune 500 company. I read it 3 times before believing it was real. Holy shit, I whispered, staring at my laptop screen in our upgraded office, a real office, not a garage, though still in East Hartford to keep costs down. Sam looked up from her code. What? Another rejection? Disney wants a demo. The room went silent. Lena dropped her phone. Sam's fingers froze over her keyboard. Disney. As in, Disney. Their chief operations officer says our solution could solve a specific problem they've been struggling with for years, coordinating between their park operations and digital planning systems. We'd stumbled onto something we hadn't even realized we were building. While trying to create a productivity tool, we'd actually solved a deeper problem, the expensive, error-prone gap between physical operations and digital management systems. Companies were losing millions to this disconnect, and we'd built the bridge without knowing it. The demo was in 2 weeks. We worked 18-hour days refining everything. I practiced the presentation until I could do it in my sleep. Sam stress-tested every possible scenario. Lena crafted backup plans for backup plans. The Disney meeting changed our trajectory. They didn't just want our product. They wanted it customized for their operations. And they were willing to pay $500,000 annually for it. $500,000, Sam kept repeating after we signed the contract. That's real money. More companies followed. Marriott, FedEx, regional hospital systems. Each had the same expensive problem we could solve. Our annual recurring revenue hit $2 million by year 2. We hired 5 employees, then 10, then 20. The girl who'd been publicly humiliated in Boston was now CEO of one of the fastest-growing B2B startups in Connecticut. But success made me hungrier for vindication, not satisfied. I kept tabs on Gregory Miles. He'd launched another fund, Century Innovation Partners, focused on identifying transformative companies early. The irony wasn't lost on me. In interviews, he still preached about recognizing real innovation versus wannabe disruption. He became a judge on a startup reality show, crushing dreams for entertainment. "You need to let it go," Sam told me one evening as I watched clips from his show. "We're winning. Isn't that enough?" "We're succeeding," I corrected. "Winning means something different." The opportunity came through LinkedIn, of all places. A reporter from Fortune was writing a piece on second chance startups, companies that succeeded after initial rejection. She'd heard about my Boston humiliation through the startup gossip network. "Would you be willing to discuss it on record?" she asked during our call. "No," I said, then added, "Not yet." I had bigger plans than a magazine feature. Instead, I focused on growth. We closed our Series A at a $50 million valuation. TechCrunch covered us again, this time calling us the startup that quietly became essential. Fortune included us in their 40 under 40 list. I was invited to speak at conferences, including, ironically, the same Boston Innovators Summit where everything had started. I declined that one. I wasn't ready to return to Boston. Not yet. The breakthrough insight came during a partnership meeting with Microsoft. Their enterprise team was interested in integration, but more importantly, they mentioned something that made my pulse race. "We're hosting our annual Future of Work Summit in New York this December," the partnership director said. 3,000 attendees, CTOs, investors, industry leaders. We'd love to have Artemis Tech present as one of our featured partners. "Who else presents?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oracle, Salesforce, and..." He checked his notes. "Century Innovation Partners is doing a session on identifying breakthrough innovations." I nearly laughed out loud. Gregory Miles would be there, on stage, talking about recognizing innovation at the same event where I'd be presenting. "We're in," I said immediately. After the meeting, Sam pulled me aside. "Emily, I know that look. What are you planning?" "Our public launch," I said. "We've been in stealth mode long enough, growing quietly, proving ourselves to enterprise clients. It's time to show the world what we've built." "And it has nothing to do with Gregory being there?" I smiled. Everything has something to do with everything else. We had 3 months to prepare. 3 months to turn a product presentation into something unforgettable. 3 months to craft the perfect response to a humiliation that had haunted me for 2.5 years. Lena understood immediately when I told her. "You want to bury him?" "No," I said, looking at the wall of no that we'd preserved in our new office, his tweet still pinned at the center. "I want him to bury himself. All I have to do is succeed so spectacularly that his words become his own noose." The anger that had fueled me was evolving into something more powerful. Patience. Revenge wasn't about destroying Gregory Miles. It was about building something so undeniable that his dismissal of it would become the defining mistake of his career. Every major tech publication would be at the summit, every important investor, every potential partner. And Gregory Miles would have a front row seat to watch the garbage he'd dismissed transform into gold. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. The news hit like a thunderclap 2 weeks before the summit. I was reviewing our presentation deck when Lena burst into my office, laptop in hand, face flushed with anger. "That motherfucker," she said, shoving the screen in my face. It was a Bloomberg interview with Gregory Miles, published that morning. The headline read, "Century Innovations Miles warns of copycat startups flooding enterprise market." I read with growing disbelief as Gregory specifically mentioned Artemis Tech by name. "There's a company out of Connecticut, Artemis Tech, that's gained some traction recently," he told the interviewer. "But when you look closely, it's essentially repackaging existing solutions with slick marketing. I actually evaluated their founder's concept years ago. It was derivative then, and it's derivative now. They've just gotten better at hiding it." The interviewer pressed him. "They've secured contracts with Disney and Microsoft. That suggests real innovation, doesn't it? Gregory laughed, that same dismissive sound from Boston. Big companies make bad bets all the time. Remember when Walmart invested heavily in Jet.com? Sometimes corporations throw money at problems hoping something sticks. That doesn't validate the technology. But he wasn't done. The killing blow came next. I've heard rumors that their original prototype was heavily inspired by existing patents. I wouldn't be surprised if we see intellectual property challenges soon. These kinds of founders, desperate to prove something, often cut corners. My hands shook as I finished reading. He wasn't just dismissing us anymore. He was actively trying to destroy our reputation before our public launch. Can we sue? Sam asked after reading it herself. For what? He's careful with his words. Rumors? Wouldn't be surprised. He's a snake, but he's a smart snake. The article spread like wildfire. Our investors called, concerned. 2 potential clients postponed meetings. Disney's procurement team requested documentation proving our IP was original. The damage was immediate and tangible. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my apartment, laptop open, watching our company Slack fill with worried messages from employees. 3 years of building, and Gregory Miles was trying to destroy it all with a few carefully placed insinuations. My phone rang at 3 a.m. It was Jennifer Liu from TechCrunch, the reporter who'd written our first major piece. Emily, I'm sorry to call so late, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Gregory's people are shopping a story around about patent disputes. They're trying to create smoke even if there's no fire. Why would he do this now? I asked, though I knew the answer. You're getting too successful. And from what I hear, he's been telling this story about dismissing you in Boston as proof of his keen judgment. If you succeed publicly, it makes him look like an idiot. After we hung up, I made a decision. I called an emergency meeting for 6 a.m. We're not going to respond, I announced to my exhausted but determined team. Not in the press, not on social media, not anywhere. Emily, we have to say something, Lena argued. He's destroying our reputation. No, we're going to let him keep talking. The more he says, the more rope he has to hang himself with. I pulled up our summit presentation. But we are going to make one change to our launch. I spent the next 48 hours on the phone with every single one of our clients. Disney, Microsoft, Marriott, FedEx. I asked each of them for one thing, a favor. Would you be willing to send someone to New York to be part of our presentation? Most said yes immediately. They were furious about Gregory's implications that they were foolish investors. Meanwhile, Gregory doubled down. He appeared on a podcast, then a YouTube show, each time mentioning Artemis Tech as an example of hype over substance. He was building his narrative. He was the wise investor who saw through the smoke and mirrors while others were fooled. Our employees were demoralized. Our investors nervous. One board member suggested we postpone the public launch. Maybe we should wait until this blows over, he said during an emergency board call. No, I said firmly. We launch as planned. Emily, he's going to be there. He's turned this into a public battle. Good. Let him think he's already won. The truth was, Gregory had made a crucial mistake. In his arrogance, he'd put his reputation on the line. He'd bet publicly, loudly, and repeatedly that we were frauds. He'd staked his credibility as an innovation expert on our failure. And in 10 days, in front of 3,000 people and streaming to thousands more, I was going to prove him catastrophically wrong. But not with words, not with arguments. With something he couldn't dismiss or spin, cold, hard proof from the mouths of the very companies he'd called foolish. Sam found me in the office at midnight a week before the summit, staring at Gregory's latest tweet, looking forward to separating real innovation from theatrical presentations at next week's summit. You know what the best part is? Sam said, sitting beside me. He has no idea what's coming. He thinks you're going to defend yourself, argue with him, try to prove him wrong with words. But I'm not, I said. No. You're going to do something much worse. She smiled. You're going to let reality do it for you. The shadow of Boston had followed me for 3 years. In 1 week, I was going to step out of it completely. And Gregory Miles, the man who'd created that shadow, would be sitting in the front row to witness his own humiliation. He'd fired the first shot years ago. He'd fired the second shot this week. But I was about to end the war. The Javits Center in New York loomed before me like a glass cathedral. December 15th, 7 a.m. The Future of Work Summit would begin in 2 hours, and my team had been there since 5, setting up our presentation space. Streaming setup confirmed, Lena reported, checking her tablet. We'll be live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and the Summit platform. Estimated reach of 50,000 viewers. My hands were steady as I reviewed everything one final time. The presentation deck, the live demo stations, the surprise element that Gregory knew nothing about. Emily, they're here? Sam whispered. I turned to see representatives from Disney, Microsoft, Marriott, and 7 other major clients entering through the service entrance. We'd flown them in secretly, keeping their participation off the official agenda. They wore visitor badges, not speaker ones, anonymous until the moment I needed them. Thank you for coming, I said, shaking each hand. The Disney CTO, Robert Chen, pulled me aside. After what that asshole said about us making bad bets, we wouldn't miss this for anything. At 8:30, I stood backstage watching the main hall fill. 3,000 seats, nearly all occupied. Tech journalists in the press section, investors scattered throughout. And there, in the literal front row, center seat, was Gregory Miles. He looked confident, relaxed, chatting with other VCs, occasionally checking his phone. He'd be speaking right after me, a session titled Identifying True Innovation in a Hype-Driven Market. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. 30 minutes until showtime, the stage manager announced. I closed my eyes, remembering that bathroom in Boston where I'd cried off my makeup, the garage where we'd worked without heat, the nights I'd stayed up wondering if Gregory was right, if I was just deluding myself. Emily, Sam touched my shoulder. You good? I'm perfect. The preparation had been meticulous. We'd rehearsed the presentation 50 times. Every slide, every transition, every word was deliberate. But the real preparation had been 3 years of building something undeniable. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Emily Carver, CEO of Artemis Tech. The walk to center stage felt both endless and instant. The lights were blinding, but I could see Gregory clearly. Arms crossed, a small smirk on his face. He expected a defensive presentation, a desperate attempt to refute his claims. He was about to get something very different. 3 years ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the massive hall. Someone told me my idea was garbage, not worth the plastic it was molded from. A murmur rippled through the audience. Those who knew the story leaned forward. They were right. Dead silence. Gregory's smirk widened. The original prototype was flawed. The concept needed work. The execution was rough. I clicked to the first slide, a photo of our garage office. But here's what that person didn't understand. Garbage can be recycled, refined, transformed. The presentation unfolded like a symphony. Act 1, the problem we'd discovered, backed by data from 20 Fortune 500 companies losing a combined $2.8 billion annually to workflow disconnection. Act 2, our solution, demonstrated live with a complex multi-system integration that made several CTOs in the audience gasp. But Act 3 was what I'd been waiting for. Now, some have suggested our clients are making bad bets, I said, letting a hint of steel enter my voice. That companies like Disney and Microsoft are just throwing money at problems. So instead of me telling you about our value, I thought you should hear from them directly. The lights dimmed, and one by one, my clients took the stage, not pre-recorded testimonials, not written statements. Live executives from billion-dollar companies standing on stage to defend their investment in us. Robert from Disney spoke first. Artemis Tech saved us $12 million in the first year alone. Microsoft's integration director followed. We've evaluated 17 solutions. Artemis is the only one that actually works at scale. Marriott, FedEx. Each testimony more damning to Gregory's narrative than the last. The knockout blow came from an unexpected source. James Harrison, CTO of Blackstone Group, whom I hadn't even known was attending, stood up from the audience. "I wasn't planned to speak," he said, commandeering a microphone. "But after hearing certain people question our judgment, I need to say this. We're not just a client of Artemis Tech. As of this morning, Blackstone is leading their Series B at a $400 million valuation." The audience erupted. Phones came out. Reporters started typing furiously. A $400 million valuation meant we were approaching unicorn territory. It meant every word Gregory had said was not just wrong, but spectacularly, publicly, humiliatingly wrong. I found Gregory's eyes in the chaos. His face had gone pale, the smirk replaced by something between shock and rage. He knew what this meant. Every interview, every podcast, every dismissive comment was about to be replayed with this context. Innovation, I concluded, my voice cutting through the noise, isn't about being right the first time. It's about having the persistence to prove the doubters wrong, even when those doubters are very loud, even when they're very confident, even when they're sitting in the front row. I didn't look at Gregory for that last line. I didn't need to. Everyone else did. The applause was deafening, a standing ovation that lasted 3 full minutes. And through it all, Gregory Miles sat frozen in his front row seat, unable to leave without making it worse, forced to watch the complete destruction of his narrative. But I wasn't done. Not quite yet. The standing ovation was still thundering when the moderator announced, "We'll now have a 15-minute break before Mr. Gregory Miles presents on Identifying True Innovation." Gregory stood abruptly, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. He pushed through the crowd toward the side exit, his phone already at his ear. I knew he was calling his PR team, trying to figure out damage control. "Emily, that was..." Sam couldn't finish her sentence, tears streaming down her face. "It's not over," I said quietly. "He still has to give his presentation." The break felt electric. Reporters swarmed me, but I politely declined all comments. I've said everything I needed to say on stage. Meanwhile, Twitter exploded. Someone had already created a supercut of Gregory's dismissive comments about Artemis Tech paired with our valuation announcement. It went viral in minutes. Jennifer Liu from TechCrunch caught my eye from across the room. She mouthed, "Holy shit," and gave me a thumbs up. When the break ended, I deliberately took a seat in the 5th row, center section, visible but not provocatively so. Sam and Lena flanked me. The hall filled again, everyone eager to see how Gregory would respond. He walked on stage differently than before, shoulders rigid, jaw clenched. Gone was the casual arrogance. This was a man who knew he was walking into a disaster. "Good morning," he began, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "I'm here to talk about identifying true innovation." "Is Artemis Tech a true innovation?" someone shouted from the audience. Gregory's face flushed. "I'm not here to discuss specific companies." "But you discussed them pretty specifically on Bloomberg," another voice called out. The moderator tried to restore order, but the damage was done. Gregory attempted to continue his presentation, but it was a train wreck. Every slide about recognizing real value was met with skeptical murmurs. When he mentioned doing due diligence, someone actually laughed. 20 minutes into his 40-minute slot, a notification lit up phones throughout the audience. Business Insider had just published, "VC Gregory Miles faces credibility crisis after dismissing now $400 million per startup." Gregory saw it too. The glow of hundreds of screens impossible to miss. He stopped mid-sentence, staring at the sea of phones. "You know what?" he said suddenly, his composure finally cracking. "Let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, I evaluated Emily Carver's original concept 3 years ago. Yes, I found it lacking. And yes, I stand by that assessment of what I saw then." The room tensed. "But," he continued, and I could see the effort it took him to say the word, "successful companies evolve. They iterate. Perhaps I should have been more open to that possibility." It was the closest thing to an admission of error he could manage, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Mr. Miles, a reporter stood up. You said last week that Artemis Tech was derivative and suggested potential patent issues. Do you still maintain that position? Gregory gripped the podium. I was sharing concerns that were brought to my attention. By whom? The reporter pressed. I'm not at liberty to. Because Artemis Tech has announced they're considering legal action for defamation. The reporter continued. Would you like to comment? We hadn't announced any such thing, but Gregory didn't know that. His face went from red to white. I think we should return to the presentation topic. But the audience was done with him. People started leaving, not dramatically, not rudely, just a steady trickle of professionals who had better things to do than watch a man's reputation implode. By the time Gregory finished, speaking to a half-empty room, his career as a kingmaker was effectively over. He'd staked his credibility on my failure, and my success had destroyed him. As he left the stage, our eyes met. For just a moment, I saw in his face what I'd felt in that Boston bathroom. Complete, utter humiliation. The recognition that everyone was watching, judging, dismissing. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded, once, and looked away. Come on, I told Sam and Lena. We have interviews to do. As we walked toward the press area, Lena whispered, You know he's done, right? No one will ever take his investment advice seriously again. Maybe he'll learn something from it, I said. Sam snorted. Men like Gregory don't learn. They just find someone else to blame. She was probably right, but I didn't care anymore. The anger that had fueled me for 3 years was gone, replaced by something better. Vindication. That night, Garbage 2 Gold trended globally. Someone leaked security footage from the Boston event 3 years ago, showing Gregory tossing my prototype back at me. Paired with footage of my presentation and the standing ovation, it became the perfect narrative of poetic justice. Gregory Miles deleted his Twitter account by midnight. Century Innovation Partners issued a statement distancing themselves from his comments. By morning, 3 companies had pulled their applications from his fund. But the sweetest moment came in a text from Robert at Disney. Watching that asshole squirm was worth the flight. Thanks for the front row seat to the best show of the year. The public humiliation Gregory had gifted me 3 years ago had been returned with interest, and unlike him, I hadn't needed to lie, exaggerate, or tear anyone down to do it. Success, it turned out, was the best revenge. The Artemis Tech after-party took over the entire top floor of the Mandarin Oriental. By the time I arrived, the celebration was in full swing. Investors who'd ignored us for years suddenly wanted meetings. Reporters who'd never returned our emails were asking for exclusive interviews. Success has a way of rewriting history. Everyone wanted to claim they'd always believed in us. I escaped to the balcony, needing air and quiet. Manhattan sparkled below, a constellation of ambitions and dreams. 3 years ago, I'd stood in a Boston bathroom, makeup ruined, career seemingly over. Now I was worth, on paper at least, over $100 million. Congratulations. I turned. Gregory Miles stood in the doorway, looking older than he had that morning. His usual entourage was nowhere to be seen. You shouldn't be here, I said. I know. I'll leave. But I needed to say something first. He stepped onto the balcony, maintaining careful distance. You won. Completely. Decisively. Publicly. I waited. I've been in this industry for 20 years, he continued, staring at the city lights. I've been wrong before, many times, but I've never been wrong so memorably. You weren't just wrong, I said quietly. You were cruel. He nodded. I was. I've destroyed dozens of dreams with the same casual cruelty I showed you. You're just the first one who came back to haunt me for it. I didn't do this to haunt you, Gregory. I did it to prove you wrong. No, he said, finally meeting my eyes. You did it to prove yourself right. There's a difference. And that difference is why you won. He pulled out his phone, showed me his screen. It was a draft email to TechCrunch, a full statement acknowledging his misjudgment, apologizing for his defamatory comments, and announcing his resignation from Century Innovation Partners. "My partners don't know yet," he said. "They'll find out when everyone else does tomorrow morning." "Why show me?" "Because you earned it. The right to know you didn't just beat me, you ended me." He pocketed his phone. "My grandfather built ships. My father built companies. I just judged other people's work. And I wasn't even good at that." He turned to leave, then paused. "That prototype you showed me in Boston, it really was garbage." I bristled, but he held up a hand. "But you knew that. And you fixed it. You turned garbage into gold through sheer force of will. That's the difference between builders and critics. Builders can learn from being wrong. Critics just become irrelevant." He left without another word. I never spoke to him again. The next morning, his resignation letter made headlines. He disappeared from the tech scene entirely, later surfacing as a high school computer science teacher in Vermont. Some called it karma. I called it a waste, all that knowledge and experience, poisoned by arrogance. 6 months later, Artemis Tech went public at a $2 billion valuation. Sam, Lena. And I rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, the same stage where so many dreams are made and broken. The photographers asked us to hold up something symbolic. I pulled out the original prototype, the one Gregory had called garbage, now framed in gold. "That's a bit on the nose, isn't it?" Lena laughed. "Sometimes the nose is exactly where you want to hit." I replied. The photo went viral, naturally. It became a Silicon Valley symbol of persistence, featured in every rejection to success listicle. Harvard Business School wrote a case study. I gave a TED Talk that got 12 million views. But the moment that mattered most came later. Privately, a young woman approached me after a speaking event, tears in her eyes. "I was at that Boston event," she said. "I saw what he did to you. I was developing my own product. But after watching that, I quit. I thought if someone like you could be dismissed so easily, what chance did I have?" My heart sank. But then I saw your presentation in New York, and I realized the only person who could really kill my dream was me. I restarted my company 6 months ago. We just closed our seed round. That's when I understood the true cost of Gregory's cruelty, not just to me, but to everyone who'd witnessed it and internalized the message that their dreams were garbage. And the true value of public revenge, showing those same people that the critics don't get the final word. I still have that original prototype, displayed in my office between the rejection letters and the IPO certificate. Visitors always ask about it, expecting an inspiring story about never giving up. "It's a reminder," I tell them. Which is true. What I don't tell them is what it reminds me of. That moment when Gregory Miles tossed it back at me like trash. The sound of laughter from his audience, the taste of humiliation. And then, 3 years later, the sound of his career ending with thunderous applause. Some people say success is the best revenge. They're wrong. Success in front of the person who doubted you, with them forced to watch, unable to leave, as everyone they respect celebrates what they dismissed. That's the best revenge. And reader, if someone tells you your dream is garbage, frame that insult. Put it where you can see it every day. Let it fuel you through the late nights and early mornings, through the rejections and setbacks. Then, when you finally succeed, and you will if you persist, make sure they have a front row seat to watch their words become their legacy. The garbage they dismissed might just become the gold that buries them. Thank you for listening to my story of revenge and redemption. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about dealing with doubters and critics. Have you ever proven someone dramatically wrong? I'd love to hear your story in the comments.